Okay, class, picking up where we left off at, we can actually go back up here because the numbers are getting quite large. So we can go back up till we get to some of those 0.5s. Like we could do 22 and 3.5 because we could graph half points here. So now they want us to then graph by hand. And this is what I would want you to do on the test. You can plot these points, but just for the sake of time, we could press graph and we can see the graph here. Then we could draw a graph that's representative of these points onto this graph here. Okay, so now it says here, state the domain of g of x. Okay, now the domain, we know that is the x value. The x value would start at -3 and go on to infinity. And just to show that, if you look here, let me go to Zoom Stat. I think it probably was shorter. Oh, okay, it doesn't have that. Let me go to Zoom Standard. Okay, now under Zoom Standard, if you notice here, the first it goes out for x is -3, and then it goes on forever. So that is why -3 is the smallest term here and is included, and it goes on in the positive direction to infinity. Now we want to state the range. Now if you look here, the range, -4 is the lowest value for y. But if you notice, this graph keeps going up. So it will go from -4 to infinity. And if you notice here, our endpoints are either going to be our leading points or our ending points when we do our domain and range. Does everyone follow that? That is the purpose of an endpoint. Because if it would have failed, then -3 would have been the largest. It would have been over here and it would have been to negative infinity and so on. Okay, now we go on to the next page. It says for functions of the form y equals a times x minus h squared plus k are graphed on the same scale below. Determine the signs of a, h, and k. Okay, now this is what we would do. A is positive. H we know is positive, and k is also positive. Okay, now remember when we did the, well, okay, A basically determines whether the graph is rising or staying down here, rising or going down. So because the graph is rising, that means A is positive. Now, well, actually A means that the graph is increasing, which we see here. H is what actually determines if the graph is going up or down. If the graph is going up or down, then H is positive. And K basically does the shift. If it shifts to the left, then it's positive. If it shifts to the right, then it's negative. Okay, so now we come here. We have B. We have A, which would be negative, because you notice it's decreasing. Now we have H, which is negative. You notice it went to the right, so it's negative. Well, actually it went down and it's negative. And then if you notice K, this graph is going to the right, so then it is also negative. Now we come here to C. Now we have A is negative. Now we have H. H would be positive. And then finally, K would be positive as well. Now, if we come here to D, A is positive. We see the graph is increasing. We have H is positive, and then K is 0. All right. So now, it says here E. It says, which graph has the largest absolute value of A? So that'll be D. And then F, which graph has the smallest absolute value of A? That will be B. And this is the steepest, and this is also the narrowest. Okay, now we go on to the next page, to number 9. Okay, now with number 9, they want us to solve this by hand. So basically we're trying to solve for x. So we would subtract 4 on both sides. So we will have the square root of 2x plus 1 is equal to 3. Now we have to square both sides to get rid of this radical. So we had 2x plus 1 is equal to 9. We'll subtract 1 on both sides, and 2x is equal to 8. We'll divide each side by 2, and x is 4. Now, what you are supposed to do here is you're supposed to check and see if 4 works in this problem. If we substitute in 4 for x, this will give us the square root of 9, which is 3, plus 4 is 7. So it actually works. So x is 4 is your solution. Now we come here to B. Now, again, we want to get x by itself. But first thing, let's add x to both sides. So we'll have the square root of 2x minus 4 is equal to x minus 2. Now we have to square both sides to get rid of the radical. So we add 2x minus 4. Now x minus 2 squared is the same as x minus 2 times x minus 2. And that would end up giving us x squared minus 4x plus 4 when we do the distributive property. Now we want to get all these values on one side. So we will subtract 2x and add 4 on both sides. So we will have 0 is equal to x squared minus 4, well actually minus 6x, not 4x. Plus 8. Now, what we need to do is this here. We can do factoring. X squared minus 6x plus 8, this factors out to be x minus 2 and x minus 4. So we would set both of these equal to 0. So we had x minus 2 equals 0 and x minus 4 equals 0. So this will give us x is 2 and x is also 4. Now we're supposed to go back and check both of these values. When you check both of these values in B, both of them work. So this is your final answer. X equals 2 and x also equals 4. Now we go here to C. We will subtract 6 on both sides. So we have the square root of x equals x minus 6. Now we have to get rid of this square root, and we do that by squaring both sides. So this will give us x is equal to, now x minus 6 in parentheses squared, we know that would be x minus 6 times x minus 6. And that would give us x squared minus 12x plus 36. So now we will subtract x on both sides. And we will have 0 is equal to x squared minus 13x plus 36. Now, since we've covered factoring in the past, we know that this factors out to x minus 9 and x minus 4. Now, we would set both of these equal to 0. So we have x minus 9 equals 0 and x minus 4 equals 0. That would give us x equals 9 and x equals 4. Now when you go back and substitute these values into this problem here, the x equals 4 would not work. Because if you put in 4, that would be 2 plus 6 is 8, and it's supposed to equal 4, and that's not correct. But 9 works because the square root of 9 is 3 plus 6 will give you 9. So it would be x equals 9. So that is why it's important for you to check that. Okay, now we go on to number 10. It says find all x-intercepts of the graph of the radical function. F of x is equal to the square root of 4x minus 7 minus the square root of 2x plus 1 by hand. Now, we know the x-intercept is when y is equal to 0. So basically, this would be 0 is equal to the square root of 4x minus 7 minus the square root of 2x plus 1. Now, what I would suggest you do is this here. Why don't we add the square root of 2x plus 1 to both sides? So we add the square root of 2x plus 1 is equal to the square root of 4x minus 7. Now, the reason why we would do that is because we have a square root on each side. So all we would have to do is square both sides to get rid of the square root. And we will have 2x plus 1 is equal to 4x minus 7. Now we just solve for x. We can subtract 2x on both sides. And we will have 1 is equal to 2x minus 7. So I'm going to write that here. So we can add 7 on both sides. And 8 is equal to 2x. Divide each side by 2. And 4 is equal to x. So our answer here would be 4 is equal to x. And when we substitute this value in, that would make this equal to 0. So your final answer written as an ordered pair would be 4, 0, because they want the x-intercept. Now, we come here to 11a. It says solve for the specified variable by hand. Now, they want us to solve for h here. So the first thing you should do is divide each side by 8. So you have v over 8 is equal to the square root of h. So then we will square both sides. So you have v squared over 64 is equal to h. And that will be your final answer for A. Now we come to B. They want us to solve for n. So what we would do here is we would square both sides to get rid of this radical. So this would be theta squared is equal to, this would be x minus m all over n. Or actually we squared. Okay, so now we want to get n by itself. So we'll multiply each side by n. So we will have n times we squared is equal to x minus mu. So we would divide each side by we squared, and we'll have n is equal to x minus m over we squared. And that is the final answer for B. Now for C, we want to get P by itself. So the first thing I would suggest that we do on both sides is multiply by 2L. Two L's will simplify out here, and we have 2L times F is equal to the square root of T over P. Now we can square both sides. And this will give us 4L squared F squared is equal to T over P. Now we want to get P by itself, so we'll multiply each side by P. So we have P times 4L squared F squared is equal to T. So now we would divide each side by 4L squared F squared. So our final answer would be P is equal to T over 4L squared F squared. And that will be our final answer. Now we come to problem 12. It says in the production of steel and other metals, the temperature of the molten metal is so great that conventional thermostats melt. Instead, sound is transmitted across the surface of the metal to a receiver on the far side, and the speed of the sound is measured. The formula. We have this formula here. Give the speed of sound S of t in feet per second at a temperature of T degrees Celsius. So we need to start on A.